on this week's show, the PlayStation 30 celebrations continue.
The Sega Saturn Slim arrives.
And how retro gaming will defeat evil AI with Jason Bradbury.
And the Retro Hour podcast is brought to you every Friday with our incredible friends at Bitmap Books. Now, have you seen one of their recent books, Run and Gun, A History of On-Foot Shooters? Now, this gorgeous book spans over 490 pages and charts 40 years of this genre. All the big games are in there, of course. Contra, Gunstar Heroes, Metal Slug, Mega Man, and plenty that you may not be familiar with, and they're definitely underrated. So if you're a fan of that genre, check it out. Run and Gun, A History of On-Foot Shooters, and the rest of their collection at bitmapbooks.com. And with our buddies at PCB Way. Now, of course, you know about PCB Way. They offer fully featured custom PCB prototyping, low cost, fast turnaround and high quality boards. And if you're looking for someone to do services like 3D printing and injection molding, they've got you covered. And check out the shared project section of their website. You know, the big supporters of the retro community. So get an instant quote right now at pcbway.com. Hello and welcome to the Retro Hour podcast, episode number 448, your weekly dose of retro gaming and technology news with me, Dan Wood.
Me, Ravi Abbott.
And me, Joe Fox.
And a very warm welcome to the podcast show that every single Friday takes you on a nostalgic trip back to the classic age of video games. Brings you up to speed on all the big developments in the world of retro from over the last 7 days. And of course, brings you veterans of the industry onto the podcast for an interview in the second half of the show every week. And I can't believe it's already our final show of September. So the nights are getting a bit longer now. Everything's becoming a little bit pumpkin spiced. You may have noticed. I do like this time of year. That means, you know, get your cozies on, play some retro games all night. It's a nice time of year, isn't it?
It is definitely my favourite type of year.
Yeah.
And it's funny that you should say that because my wife literally went and got like a pumpkin spice latte thing this morning from Costa.
You guys always love Halloween and that. I just hate it.
Yeah. Ravi's miserable for 6 months now.
Yeah, I'm miserable. Yeah.
But actually, there is lots going on, obviously, after kind of the summer lull, which, you know, you often get in the gaming industry. This time of year is always exciting in the lead up to the end of the year. And today we're going to be catching up with someone who we actually had on the podcast January 2020, which is definitely not a time most of us want to kind of think of or revisit again, is it? But this is Jason Bradbury, who's done loads, actually, in the last 4 years. Now, our UK listeners will probably remember Jason from our TV screens when he was hosting the Gadget Show back in the day, which actually just celebrated its 20th birthday in June, which is like, for people that haven't seen it, there are old episodes of the Gadget Show that you can watch on YouTube. It was often described as kind of Top Gear for nerds, really, wasn't it?
Well, it had John Bentley in, who was one of the old Top Gear presenters. Yeah. So, you know, there was that connection.
I didn't know that, actually.
Yeah. Well, actually, the Gadget Show with Jason and John and Susie, who we hosted it with, is actually back again. Because now they're hosting this as a podcast, a video podcast that you can watch on YouTube. And they've been doing it for a few months now with the original series producer. So it is awesome to see Jason back on the Gadget Show again. And we kind of reflect on, you know, the 20 years of it, because obviously you think, you know, 2004, when that show first launched on our TV screens, you know, the PS2 was the current big console at the time. Apple had not long released the Power Mac G5. You know, iPod was like the accessory that everybody wanted, you know.
Yeah.
Loads of people got an iPod in that year. So we kind of reflect on, you know, how the tech industry was looking 20 years ago. And also the way that he can do it now. Because, you know, 20 years ago they needed a whole team of producers, a massive flashy TV studio. Now a lot of these, you know, they record their episodes from their own homes.
Yeah, it was great catching up because obviously we spoke a lot about what you've just said about how the dynamics have changed so much since COVID, you know, which we did touch on a little bit, but it is crazy. I mean, even for us, you know, we had, like you say, Jason and I in January, we did that in your old radio studio.
Yes.
You know, in this huge building in Nottingham City Centre, and now we do it all from home, and it's crazy.
We had a dedicated cleaner there as well, which we haven't got now.
Yeah, exactly. We used to steal crisps from the tuck shop. That was
They can't find me now.
It was just a box. It was a box full of crisps.
Box full of crisps. But yeah, even just 4.5 years ago, if it wasn't for COVID, if you'd turn around and said, we're going to do it all from home, I would have been like, what do you mean we're going to all do it from home?
Yeah.
But we were kind of forced to make it work like so many other people. It's just become such a standard thing. And it's just, we kind of reflected back on like, what did you think the world would look like in 20 years' time back in 2004? And not to spoil the gadgets that he thought would catch on more and stuff like that. But it was a great discussion about it is definitely not what we thought it was going to be in terms of working from home and stuff like that. But that's not all we spoke about. We spoke about his new project that actually launched today, didn't it?
Yeah, now this is a Kickstarter that he's running for the next month. Like you said, Joe, launched 7 a.m. today, Friday, the 27th of September when this podcast comes out. And this is his first movie. Of course, Jason actually studied film at university back in the day. And he had some, great contemporaries that we kind of touch on as well. I mean, he used to hang out with Dominic Diamond and David Williams, people like that, back in the 90s. And he's always been a massive gaming fan. And, he's still a huge retro gaming collector. And he's actually crowdfunding his first movie, which has got influences from a lot of places. He kind of describes it as a bit of a tongue-in-cheek 80s hacker movie set in the modern day. So if you love movies back in the day, like, war games and even hackers, which obviously doesn't represent hacking in any way, shape or form, but just a great watch, real fun movie. And even crossovers of, we're talking about comedy shows like a little touch of maybe Phoenix Nights.
Yeah.
And the In-Betweeners.
In-Betweeners.
Any Johnny Five in there?
Johnny Five. We didn't mention Johnny Five. We mentioned Terminator, a little bit more sci-fi, but he said it's not so much sci-fi. It's very grounded in the real world, which sounds very cool. And it was quite funny because I was expecting Jason to be a little bit, because of the sense of the movie and everything, I thought, maybe he's a little bit anti-AI. But no, he's just like he was on the Gadget Show. He's very, embraces change in the future, which is really cool, but can also see the funny side of it. But what I absolutely love, and I came downstairs to my wife afterwards, I was telling her all about the film, is I said, what I really love about it is the style of the film is going to be very, American 80s, that kind of like neon, smoky kind of look, from the
Stranger Things aesthetic.
Stranger Things, yeah. But it's set in Skegness, which I thought is going to be fantastic. For those who don't know that's what Skegness is, our overseas listeners, it is it's a seaside town, but it's where Jason grew up. He grew up in Lincolnshire, so he wanted to kind of get back to that, kind of like those roots and everything, and just that kind of like, he said it's kind of a genre in itself, of kind of like that northern, even though it's kind of the Midlands, but that northern kind of like comedy of like.
But also, Skegness, out of all of the kind of seaside places, it didn't have the biggest arcades compared to others and stuff, but it still had a kind of a little retro gaming history. I remember there was a few. I went there a few years ago, and there was still some pinball machines and kind of shooting machines as well and stuff.
Yeah. But it's going to be a real independent film. The goal is £50,000. Nobody's getting paid. That's all to go into the budget of the film, like the filming of it, the props, etc., licensing and stuff like that. Obviously, hopefully they smash that and people can be paid and stuff like that. But it was real kind of like humble project, and it was really cool hearing all about it.
Yeah, and like you said, I mean, I love the plot of it because it's basically a bunch of geeks. We can all relate to this. We go to a gaming convention, well, probably flicking through those boxes of Super Nintendo games and things like that, locked in this big room, plenty of arcade machines, and then it turns out that a rogue AI is kind of launched, a bit Skynet kind of style. And it's up to these retro gamers who are kind of trapped in this expo to save the world using floppy disks and 8-bit computers. And basically, you've got to use these systems to outsmart the most formidable digital intelligence ever devised. So it does sound like it's just going to be a real fun movie, doesn't it? I mean, he's kind of described it, if you love movies like, Ferris Bueller's Day Off and that kind of thing, just like a real giggle and a tribute to the movies that we grew up watching. So I'm really excited about this, and there's a little trailer that you can watch right now if you want to get a kind of look at what they're going to be doing. We were talking to Jason afterwards, weren't we, about some ideas. We said, should release this on VHS tape. So he said he might consider that, which would be nice if that becomes a thing. So really looking forward to this. Jason Bradbury talking about his new retro gaming movie and a bit of a catch-up about all things gadgets. He's our special guest on the show in just over half an hour from now. Now, of course, you know the way the podcast works. First half is when we bring you up to speed on what's been happening in the wonderful world of retro gaming and technology from over the last 7 days. And Sony are gearing up to celebrate the PlayStation's 30th anniversary, because amazingly, and this does make us feel extremely old, coming up in December 3rd, that will be 30 years to the day that the original PlayStation was launched in Japan. And we did say that, Sony are doing a few things to kind of celebrate that. They kind of seem to be rolling these out week by week. But their latest announcement is something to do with their current console and something they've actually done before, isn't it, this?
Yeah, so they're doing a limited edition PS1 style PS5 in the PS5 Pro and the PS5 Slim. And they did do this 5 years ago with the PS4, which I think was the PS4 and PS4 Pro, I can't remember, where it's the modern console, but in the colour scheming and kind of like logo style, etc., of the original PlayStation. So it's a PS5, but it's that original PSX grey, and then the controller is grey as well. I think they're calling the controller it's the DualSense Advance or something like that. DualSense Edge, I think it is, which is the new PS5 Pro controller. I struggle to get my head around all of it, like all the different names and stuff.
There's one confusing aspect there, because Ravi pointed this out before we started recording, that, there's a few articles out there that are saying this is a PS1, as in PSONE, style PlayStation 5, which was the smaller white console that came out in year 2000, basically the PlayStation 1 Slim.
you know what makes me also think about that is as well, they've got a little carry case with it that kind of looks rounded in the lid style, and that made me also think of PS1. ONE.
But then some people call it PlayStation number 1, like you said then, Joe, PSX, which is generally how a lot of us called it back then. So there's so many different ways to refer to it. But we are talking about the original PlayStation that came out in 1994, that style.
And you're right, Ravi. I've just looked at that carry case. It does look like the PS1 Slim. It's very confusing. But the colour scheme is that original grey. They're also doing this in what's the PlayStation 5 portable thing called? The thing with the screen.
Oh, the Portal.
The Portal, yeah. They're doing it in the Portal as well. Mm-hmm. So it is, pretty much anything modern PlayStation you can get in this theming, this original PSX theming, which is very cool. Unfortunately, it's not for any of the disc-based consoles. So the PS5 Pro, famously last week announced, doesn't have a disc drive. And then the Digital Slim, they're doing it as well. They're doing it in the digital version only.
Right.
Obviously, you can buy the separate disc drive for $100 or £100, whatever it's going to be. And you can buy
yourself.
You can buy a cover, a PSX cover for that, the PlayStation 1 cover for that. So if you do want to have this separate disc drive, you can get
what I like about it. What I like about it is also the controller, the cable for it. They seem to have the wide surround for the original PlayStation controller, but then obviously it's USB-C coming out of the other end, and that's pretty cool.
That's the only. I'm so glad you mentioned that, Ravi. That's the only part of all of this I like. I like the charging cable and how it is based around the original PS1 controller.
And I hate to say it, I still find the new PlayStation so ugly.
They're not the sexiest looking.
It looks like a building in London, in the kind of financial district.
It looks like a bottle of Head and Shoulders to me.
Well, I mean, I must admit, I wasn't all that keen on the PS5 Pro, and they announced it last week. Like we said, $700, no optical drive, no stand included. But I'm looking at this, and this basically is, it's an original PlayStation Grey version of the PS5 Pro. This one's going to be limited to only 12,300 units. Though, which I think is quite interesting. So I'm thinking that might make these quite collectible in the future. I'm not sure whether there's any limits on because they're doing the original the PlayStation 5 Slim, like you said, in this scheme as well. What's quite interesting is if you look at a PlayStation 5 controller, really small, there are the PlayStation, I think they call them the sacred symbols these days. You know, the triangles and the square and the circle. They're actually on the grip of the controller.
Oh,
if you look really, really, really small, so you can just feel the texture. And it's when my wife brought home some reading glasses for me. That's when I managed to see those in person the other week.
I don't think I've recently got a PlayStation 5, so I haven't noticed that.
Yeah. What they've done on this is, though...
You know, Sony Vaio, you know, when they used to have those little kind of symbols on the Sony computers, it kind of looks a bit like that, having that representation.
Well, it's texturized, yeah. So basically what they've done with these, the new PlayStation 1 theme one, is they've basically got a little collection of symbols that spells out, you've got the triangle, then it says 30, then you've got the X and the square. So that's on the console, and it's also on the back of the controller, really small. But some people have pointed out on Reddit that looking at that triangle, then it says 30X square. It looks a bit like the word box, maybe a little bit too close to Xbox. I don't know whether anyone kind of thought of that when Sony were designing that logo.
I can't see it
point
myself.
That some people have
Maybe.
been. yeah. If you skip about two minutes into the video,
right,
you'll see it. It's kind of printed in the bottom corner of the console. Does look a lot.
Sounds
bit like
a bit conspiracy theorist to me.
Definitely doesn't look like Xbox.
Confirmed, it's more like Sony are buying Xbox.
Yeah, there you go. But I mean, yeah, when I was looking at this, I was like, it's just kind of a grey PS5. I do like the look of the controller, though. I think if anything, because they are going to be selling those separately, apparently.
Yeah, you're going to be able to get that separately, but it's, the Edge controller, isn't it? So I've got a feeling if it's anything like the Xbox, not to bring up Xbox again, but if it's anything like the Xbox Pro controllers, aren't they they can be hundreds of pounds, can't they?
Yeah. Oh, won't be cheap, especially limited edition kind of.
Yeah, we'll see.
So, yeah, definitely one for the collectors, though. So interesting to see what more Sony will be announcing as we gear up to the PlayStation's 30th anniversary in December. So if you want to read more about that, I'll link that story in this week's show notes. Now, speaking of going back 30 years or so, obviously when the PlayStation original was released, its contemporary, of course, a system that everyone thought may be a contender that actually got trounced in the market in, most markets, actually quite well in Japan, didn't it? The Sega Saturn, which these days seems to get a lot more love than it did over here back in 1994 and 1995, which is always nice to see. And, that we love talking about people who do these kind of homebrew mods. And this is actually the guy that brought us the that Nintendo Kawaii that we talked about in the podcast a couple of weeks ago, which was a Nintendo Wii modified to fit on your keychain. Now, this is the famous modder Wesk Mods.
Yeah.
He's now done a Sega Saturn Slim that I think looks really slick.
It looks really cool. It looks really slick. I do like the form factor and the design of it. It looks very, very high quality. It looks very official. I can't help but think, just off the back of the last story, that is there an alternative universe where we're talking about the latest Sega console that's doing the Sega Saturn 30?
I hope so, Joe. I really hope so.
My only disappointment with this is, and it's towards the end of the article, is to get it this small and slim, because it's about half the size of the original Sega Saturn. It's about half the depth.
Looks like a Mega Drive kind of size.
It's about the size of a Mega Drive, probably a little bit slimmer than a Mega Drive. But to achieve this, just feels a little bit like they've taken the disk drive out, which I get, like times have moved on, etc. And it runs off a flash cart instead, which also gives it like proper Sega Mega Drive vibes for me.
Yeah.
But I just feel, don't let me take away from the fact that I think it looks fantastic, and I'm sure it plays fantastic, and Retro Dodo here said the quality of it and everything looks amazing. But it just feels a little bit like taking the disk drive out and put it in a new shell for me, a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, there's no optical drive in here at all. It's completely been removed. It said that's the only way you could actually make it fit into this.
Because it's an original board case. Still, isn't it?
Yeah.
And he's got a little space there at the back, and I think that's for the video card as well.
Right.
So that might be able to be used for modding, or you can play video stuff in there as well. But it's basically flattened down, isn't it? And and this guy's done some amazing stuff. Wesk Mods and Yveltal Griffin. I hope I've said that right. And they've basically collaborated on the Kawaii project, which we mentioned before. But he's also posted something really interesting on his Twitter, which is he was trying to create a Nintendo PlayStation mod. And he's got the model for that out as well. And he said he hasn't got the time to kind of finish it off, but he's basically given the model out for free. So I think the thing that really shines here is the case designs themselves.
There's a few different ones, isn't there? There's basically a couple of different versions. He's got like a white one with a kind of a blue ring around it. There's one with a kind of gold ring around it by the looks of it as well.
Yeah, and he did the Dream Blade as well previously, which was that really thin Dreamcast, and that might have given him some kind of, inspiration on how to do it. And I found with a lot of these things, we've been covering them, and there's all kind of like little ways of having smaller power packs in there, having, little adapters, and there's a load of little mods and circuit boards that actually help this get possible. I'd love to see inside, see what's going on. And,
well, apparently you don't have to, because some of them, they require board trimming. He said it doesn't need any.
Okay.
It just kind of fits in there. And yeah, I mean, physically looking at it, it looks very similar to a Mega Drive. You've got kind of the circle on the top of it. The cartridge slot is now front and center, isn't it? It's like prime there in the middle, like a Mega Drive, because obviously there's no optical drive on this.
Little power by Hitachi in the corner.
Yeah.
That's cool.
You've got the two controller ports on the front as well. So it looks really slick. And obviously at the moment, this is just kind of a proof of concept. I'm not sure whether there's any plans to kind of put these out there or to manufacture them. I've got a feeling there would be a demand for them, though.
Well, yeah, there'd be a huge demand for them. And it's funny because it does feel like the, inverted commas, failed consoles of the 90s and early 2000s from the big hitters seem to be the most desired ones for the mini consoles. Like I did actually see a meme yesterday, funny enough, and it was a picture of the Sega Saturn and the GameCube, and it was like when we came out, and it's like everybody hated them, they're awful.
Yeah.
And it's like 2024, these are the most sought after consoles in the world, we love them. So
it's interesting though. Yeah.
It is interesting. I think at the time they were just, what's the word? Misunderstood when they came out. But yeah, I definitely think there would be a huge market for this, and Sega know it as well. And I'm sure they could make it work. I'm sure they could, but they just won't.
Well, like a mini system or something, you mean?
Yeah, it's been rumored for years, but people like West Mods taking it into their own hands. I don't know if you saw this video. It was a YouTube channel called Mad Little Pixel who did a video basically telling people to stop buying these kind of modded Sega Saturns, these kind of homebrew ones that you can find on places like AliExpress. That a lot of them are original boards that they've kind of took the optical drives out of and now just run off flash cards. So similar kind of to these. I mean, for some reason, when you see them on AliExpress, they're generally kind of put into third-party kind of homebrew cases. They don't look anywhere near as good as this. But yeah, it does seem to be a common thing, apparently, with the optical drives failing. And, I think this could be a good solution for that if maybe you've got an old Saturn and, you want it to look nice and just basically make it into a flash card-only system. Yeah. Could be a nice way of doing it. So hopefully there will be some of these out there at some point. So if you want to get a look at that, I'll put that in this week's show notes as well. Now, we're just getting over the excitement of a very legendary British software house making a comeback after 20 years away. We mentioned Argonaut Software, bringing back Croc on the podcast a couple of weeks ago. And no sooner are we getting hyped about that, but another legendary British studio from back in the day, again, more than 20 years since it was last heard of, is making a return. This is DID, Digital Image Design.
Yeah, DID are a really interesting company. I'm aware of their works from the Amiga. And, of course, we have Paul Hollywood on the podcast. So that was episode 45. If you want to hear more about the kind of inside story from DID, he worked on RoboCop as well. The one thing that I really remember from them was the kind of way that the technology was really pushed forwards with their programming and graphic skills. So, RoboCop had that whole first-person shooter section in there.
RoboCop 3 this was, wasn't it? Yeah, Amiga.
Which was epic, and also another one was Epic, which is one of their titles. And also TFX. I don't know if you remember that one later on the
TFX
Amiga.
Was quite an advanced flight sim, wasn't it? I mean, I must admit, I've never been a flight sim kind of guy, but I do remember a lot of the magazines getting really hyped for TFX. It was meant to be released in 1993. I've got a feeling CU Amiga eventually put it on their cover CD, didn't they?
Yeah,
like
I think there was
version.
a release on a cover CD or cover disc, but many discs probably. But it was quite high-end technology. I think it took like an 060 or an 040 to run. This was at a
it did
time
run very smoothly on
where, DID were releasing for PC as well. So they had a good PC release of that. But then the TFX engine was used on Inferno. And Inferno was one of those titles where it was released on DOS, but I remember seeing these promo adverts that you would get for all the great titles that were going to come on the Amiga CD32, and Inferno was one. And it would be interesting to see if that would finally get released. Is there anything about the plans of what's going to happen with this re-emergence of DID?
Well, it looks like so far it is literally just a little teaser that's been posted on X from the official DID account with an image of the old logo, and it just says, "Stay tuned this year."
Okay, so
that's all we've got so far.
Yeah, we will see, because there's a lot of flight simulators there, and I can imagine people in the flight simulator worlds are really, really kind of excited about that, especially if you're thinking get your old high-end PC flight sim joystick out and see if we could get some futuristic stuff going.
So I do remember when RoboCop came out on the Amiga, RoboCop 3. Obviously, it's kind of remembered these days for that kind of infamous hardware dongle.
The anti-piracy measure, yeah.
Yeah, because I do remember Gary Bracey in, I think it was an Amiga format, in an interview just before the game came out, basically bragging about how this game was like unpiratable. No one's going to be able to hack this.
No, it's cracked in a week.
Well, I've got a feeling it was on the pirated bulletin boards the day before it came out in shops. So that was kind of a red rag to a bull, as they say. But actually, it was a very groundbreaking game. I mean, really, it was a bit like a proto FPS, wasn't it, really?
Yeah.
It came out in 1991, I've got a film that came out. And then Epic, I remember my friend having that because he got the Amiga 600 pack that came in. I've got a film that built like a pack around it called the Epic Pack, it might have been, actually. And it was kind of a bit like an elite kind of game, wasn't it? Like a space combat.
Yeah. And they did a lot like F-22 as well, and Eurofighter, Typhoon, and they were really, really big on the flight simulators.
Yeah, and again, just those 3D graphics that they were doing on systems like an Amiga 600, which was a 7 megahertz, 1 megabyte computer, using those nice polygons and bitmaps, and even the cutscenes in their games I remember being really impressive as well. And it is a company that really pushed the boundaries of technology back in the early 90s. So apparently they kind of faded away in 2003. They went through a few different companies. So no word's been really heard from DID since 2003. But now apparently there is going to be a new iteration of the company. Like we said, no further details yet apart from stay tuned. So a story that we will keep an eye on. But welcome back, DID. Always nice to see legendary publishers from back in the day making a comeback. Now, Joe's got a day off today. The time we're recording this.
1 second, I'm just applying for a job, guys.
Yeah, I was going to say, yeah. Because this sounds right up your street. Sega are paying $100,000 for an official archivist.
Joe's doing that anyway.
I do it anyway. Yeah. If I put my camera on right now, I'm actually sat in front of a big bookcase of Sega Saturn and Mega Drive games. Yeah, they've currently advertising this role, which I had to read a couple of times to get my head around what you're actually doing. Mm-hmm. But it's central to Sonic. It's all kind of based around Sonic by the looks of things. And there's a lot involved with it. It's a funny one. So it's kind of like developing and managing and preserving the history of Sonic and the lore of Sonic, but across all kind of like languages and like forms of media. And you'll be responsible for collating, making a library of physical materials and digitizing them.
Yeah.
And then it says, then the role will then include supporting other non-Sonic IPs. So I'm assuming they have a project at the moment.
Yeah, I guess
that requires this role.
It's kind of working in the like museum and heritage kind of area, and archiving it in that manner, but also they might be looking at that Nintendo museum and how they've been approaching their history recently. So we need to step up our game. We've got a big history. We've got some big brands. Let's shout about it, because Nintendo certainly are.
Yeah, I think you could be right there, Ravi. I didn't even think of that. But what I do like is in the job description, it does say, are you a fan of Sonic the Hedgehog, Golden Axe, or Persona? So it's nice to see them kind of like, recognizing. I mean, Persona's still going, but other franchises such as Golden Axe in there.
Yeah, there's more to Sega than just Sonic.
Yeah, it does say hybrid work model, but then it says the job location is in Burbank in California. So I'm not, and the fact that you have to collate it and digitize it all and make a library of all this stuff, I imagine it is mostly on site in California.
You could convince the wife to move to California. Yeah, sunshine.
Well, it's for the salary of $100,000, maybe. Maybe
it could be 130. It says
with these kind of things, like the BBC famously used to tape over all of their old shows, not archive it correctly, not archive their history, and I find it interesting that they're focusing on like their highest brands and their most famous ones. They're not going for everything. They're not going to have the crap in there, which makes me kind of think it might be a selective telling, like a kid showing off and saying, "Oh, I did this, I did that," and not mentioning all the other kind of stuff in there. People rewrite history and stuff. It's interesting how they're going to approach it, because a true archive would be everything, would be all the failures or the worst games that they've created as well. And same with Nintendo. I don't know if Nintendo have a whole Virtual Boy section. They might. But there's probably worse titles.
I'd love it if they did.
The Virtual Boy experience. But it's interesting when it comes to archiving and the approach of just focusing on Sonic.
Yeah, it does sound to me like, if you read into the job advert, it says I want someone who's extremely well versed in all things Sonic, the lore, the characters, the games, animations, comics, movies. And one of the things I want you to do is basically help to bring consistency and connectivity across all things Sonic. So it sounds like they want, maybe a bit better continuity in the different IPs. So, people aren't.
What about poor Alex Kidd? He's been left out.
Keep you busy for $100,000 to $130,000, so maybe you can expand to that as well. In terms of the main point of this is really just it's very cool to see a company recognizing how important this is.
Yeah, focusing on their history finally, which is good. And Sega seems to be doing that a lot more, and so does Nintendo actually.
So if you want to apply for that, I'll link up the job advert. Looks like it is still recruiting at the moment, like you said, Joe, in Burbank, California. Full-time job, working at Sega, working on their archiving all things Sonic. So I'll put that in this week's show notes as well.
Move to California, Joe. You can do it.
I can do it. See you later, guys.
Now, just one more story to talk about for our non-patrons. Patrons get a couple of extra ones. But this is an interesting article in The Metro, which is... I think it's still a newspaper, isn't it? I've not seen a physical copy of it for a while. Do they still do the print version of the Metro?
Yeah, they still chuck it out there at train stations.
Yes, I haven't got a train or a bus for a while. But they have a website too, like all newspapers do. They've done this article, which we won't go through the whole thing because, frankly, half of it's nonsense. But there are some interesting talking points in here. This is the top 10 greatest innovations in video games, according to the author, which is Game Central. Now, this is one of their reader features. This guy's saying he's been a, gamer since the 90s. And he's gone through basically, look at his own personal nostalgia, things that gaming got right over the last couple of decades. Although there might be some interesting talking points here. First one he mentions is shoulder buttons on the Super Nintendo joypad, which, you kind of forget, like, life before shoulder buttons.
Yeah, I think it still took a few generations for shoulder buttons to really take off. It feels very 6th gen for me, because obviously first person shooters, etc., action games, the shoulder buttons became such a huge thing. And I still remember playing PlayStation, and to a degree, GameCube, PlayStation 2, Xbox, where the face buttons would still be like to shoot or punch or whatever kind of thing. But obviously the back end of that gen, the back end of the early 2000s, it became very pull the trigger to shoot, etc. But yeah, it did. It started with the Super Nintendo. way back in 1991.
I think this is quite an interesting article because it's a user-submitted article, so it's a reader that's actually put their views in, which has gone then onto the Metro, which is DW. And he's got some points in this, but I think the interesting thing would be us to talk about, what we thought were the big things that change video games. And for me, I've done a little list quickly, which is I thought death matches being invented, on games where you had death matches and the different kind of multiplayer modes were really, really interesting and a total change. That was something that was created online, just everyone getting together and destroying each other. I also think the Wiimote as well was a huge change in video games and innovation that really, really changed things, the way of playing interactive games,
I think it did briefly, but it does seem like motion controls are not something that's kind of aged or are really around anymore. I mean, like the Switch can do it, but I can't say I ever use the motion controls on the Joy-Cons.
I tried on the House of the Dead remake and it was awful.
Yeah.
I ended up just playing it with the analog sticks.
Feels innovative for its time, but I think, not something that's kind of had a lasting impact on gaming, in my opinion. Motion controls. Is that your list? Yeah. Well, some other things on here. He mentions Rumble, which obviously... Yeah, I mean, I've never been a big fan of Rumble. We talk about this. I always turn Rumble off when I'm playing games like Call of Duty.
I forget I have it. Or, like you say, put my controllers into like battery saving mode and stuff. I would say, we just poo-pooed on Ravi's, motion controls, but I'd say motion controls was probably, like you say, it's not as big now, but is much more remembered and bigger and integral to gaming than Rumble ever was.
Joysticks. What about
analog sticks? Analog sticks, joysticks. Yeah. That's a huge one.
Do you remember when he first used them? I remember my brother getting the original PlayStation. He just had the the one without the analog sticks, and then he upgraded to that a couple of years later. And I remember it took me quite a while to. It felt really fiddly. I thought I was playing Tomb Raider, maybe 2 or 3 with them, and I remember thinking it took me quite a while to feel comfortable using analog sticks to control 3D characters.
I think I'd been playing the N64 by then, so it didn't bother me so much. But I am very a D-pad forever kind of guy. If I'm playing a beat 'em up or a fighter or anything retro, I find I always use the D-pad over the analog sticks where I can. But
2D games I always do.
Yeah, I'll give it that one. Analog sticks. Number 4 on their frame rate, which I thought was quite an interesting one because of one of my best mates, James, always talks about frame rates. He always takes the mick out of me. I've only just got a PlayStation 5. He's like, oh, what mode are you playing it in? What's your TV's frame rate and all this? And I'm like, just play it. If it looks good, it looks good.
As long as it doesn't lag, I'm fine with it, Yeah. I do see some gamers have the little frame rate kind of readouts in the corner of their screen and they're watching it religiously, and if it drops to below 60, it's, the game's ruined. Which, to be, I'm the same as you. As long as it doesn't make me feel sick.
14 was all right back in the day.
Next one he mentioned on the list is touchscreen, which, I don't know. I don't think I've never been a fan of touchscreen games, even when using, he mentions the DS in here as well. Again, I've got a 3DS. Can't remember using the touchscreen all that much in it. If I could avoid it, never been a fan of playing games on the iPhone and stuff like that.
Memory card,
and on screen.
Yeah, you know what? I'd get rid of touchscreen and put memory card in. Yeah, saving. That's a huge one. I think that's a huge omission, actually. That's got me. I got passionate then. I think.
Another one there. He's got virtual reality on here as well, which again, it's something we did talk in the interview with Jason coming up in a moment about VR and kind of how it's tried to get off the ground many times over the last 3 decades, and obviously feels closer now than it ever has, but still probably hasn't reached that kind of adoption yet. And you and I talking, Joe, about we've all got VR headsets and we don't really use them. Mm-hmm. So I think it's cool. Obviously, it's very interesting technology, but hasn't changed gaming all that much for me, personally. Next one on the list, I think, is a bit of a cop-out. Good games.
Yeah.
We all like good games. I thought that. What about
what an innovation.
Drives? Yeah, optical drives.
We had awful games for years. Now we've got good games.
Yeah, I think the CD-ROM drive was a game changer that should be in there. Going from cartridges to discs in optical discs. That I think will be one of the biggest changes I've seen in my life.
Yeah.
In terms of video games, the storage has suddenly massively increased. Then the rest of it, the start button, which is kind of that's been around since the NES. Or do you remember? Well, actually, the Atari 2600 that had a start button on the system itself.
Yeah, true. Yeah.
So has kind of been there since the beginning. Trigger buttons he talks about as well, which kind of similar to shoulder buttons, isn't it? You couldn't imagine playing games today without the triggers. I understand that. And then the social aspect of it. He does mention the Wii, which I've got a load of great memories of drunken house parties back in the mid-2000s playing Wii bowling. I think in terms of the social aspect of it, that's definitely always been a really important part of gaming. Even going back to when I was a kid, summer holidays, my mates over, sitting down in front of the telly playing my Commodore Plus 4 and then my Amiga, and go around friends' houses to play the PlayStations and Dreamcast at university, and online gaming I think should definitely be on this list as well. In terms of opening that up to the entire world. So interesting list. And if you look through at the top 10, I think, like I said, stuff like good games and stuff just feel a bit of a cop-out. I've got a feeling there could be more included in this. So if anyone's got any suggestions, it would be interesting to hear what you think have been some of the greatest innovations in video games over the last 30, 40 years. So I'll link up that article if you want to read it. And of course, all the rest of the stories, you don't have to Google around. I put them in the show notes on your podcast app, or you can head to the website at theretrohour.com. Right, Sunday coming up, Patrons Hangout, Sunday night. What is it, Joe?
Patrons Hangout, we do it on the last Sunday of every month usually. We all get together on a big Zoom call with anybody who supports us on Patreon. So any level of Patreon you do, you will be invited to the Patron Hangout. And it started out as a big kind of like Zoom, Google Meets kind of call where we all come on. We chat about everything, really. Retro pickups, retro films, mobile phones, what we've all been up to, what we've been collecting recently. Sometimes people ask for help on there around capture cards or, upgrading consoles and stuff like that, HDMI ports and stuff like that. So really, really interesting. We all get together. We all have a roundtable chat. Sometimes people just like to come on and listen. Don't have to come on camera or anything like that. And it's always great just to kind of like hear what everybody's been up to and, have a beer, crack one open and stuff like that and just sit back and have a chat. But we do that 8 o'clock UK time till 10 o'clock on the last Sunday usually of the month. It's coming up this Sunday. Really looking forward to it.
Yeah, so if you're back on Patreon now, you'll get an invite to that. Always such a giggle. And always very welcoming to new members as well. So if you have just joined us, it would be nice to see you on there. Also going to be doing a new episode of the After Hours podcast, which we're up to, I think, episode 45. So we'll be doing that the next week or two. This is a bonus podcast that we do just for our patrons, for gold members and above. So if your back is on there now, you'll unlock all the previous episodes. Really good, varied theme on that every single month. And the main reason that we, have a patron is just to make sure we can keep the lights on and, continue to bring podcasts out every single week into 2025. So all the details to sign up right now to our Patreon, join the community, and hopefully join us on the Hangout this coming Sunday or on the website at theretrohour.com. Right then, patrons, stay tuned. A couple of extra news stories on the way for you in just a moment. We do that for our patrons every week, so we chop all the ads out, so it'll be a couple of extra news stories. For everyone else, before we hop into Jason Bradbury, our special guest, let's take a second to give a massive thank you to this week's sponsor, and that is our friends with this sound. It's our mates at Shopify. Now, Shopify are the all-in-one commerce platform to start, run, and grow your business. Because what it feels like right now, everyone's got a bit of a side hustle going on, or maybe even think of becoming your own boss in 2025. We've been using Shopify loads over the last couple of months, because you might know we do have some of our Retro Hour books available for sale on our website, and that, of course, is powered by Shopify. And you set all this up, Ravi, you were telling us how simple Shopify is to use.
It's super easy, and we had one thing, which was we had to send to America. And, we have to collect people's phone numbers for custom. And I made sure that was actually put in once I realized we had to do that initially. And I just changed the options on it. And now it automatically makes people input them, which is just fantastic, because then we can, get it all declared. And it's going around the world. This is so shipping physical products, it really helps with all the physical sale, but also the digital sale. So we have a PDF on the website. Straight away, people can use Shopify. They can, get it delivered directly to them 24/7 as well.
You don't have to do anything, do you?
No. And there's full customer support for us as well, which is really fantastic, because I've set up these kind of online stores previously with e-commerce and plugins and updates, and it's been an absolute nightmare. But Shopify makes it really easy and means you're not missing out on sales.
Yeah, 100%. And like we said, I mean, I just wish, when we did our Kickstarter that had half the features that Shopify have. Because when we did the ebooks for our book on their Kickstarter, I had to manually send them all out in Google Drive.
Yeah, there you go.
To everyone that backed them. So Shopify does it all for you. So whether you sell anything in person or online, because they actually have those little shop-ready point-of-sale systems that you may have seen at trade shows and craft fairs and retro gaming events as well, so you can take card payments in person, so no one carries cash anymore. And even they'll get you selling across your social media marketplaces, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, full of industry-leading tools ready to ignite your growth and give you complete control over your business and your brand. Best thing is you don't have to learn any new skills. No design, no coding. It is so easy to use, and they're ready to support your success every step of the way. So if you sell anything in person or online, it's time to get serious about selling and get Shopify today. And you know that we give you amazing offers with our sponsors, and that we want you to try it out. And you can try Shopify for just £1 a month on a trial period, a no-brainer. So give it a try by using our exclusive link, so they'll know that we sent you, helps out the podcast, shopify.co.uk/retro hour. That's all one word. I'll put it in the show notes as well, so you can click straight through. Shopify.co.uk/retro hour, and get ready to take your business to the next level today and hear a lot more of this. All right, well, thank you for checking out the news on this week's podcast. We'll have more for you next Friday. And keep it here, our special guest, Jason Bradbury. Bit of a catch-up about all things Gadget Show and his really interesting new movie that has launched today on Kickstarter. Link to that in the show notes as well. He's our special guest, and he's on the podcast next. You're listening to the Retro Hour podcast, and it's time to welcome on this week's very special guest. And listeners in the UK will, of course, know our guest this week as the long-time host of the Gadget Show, which actually he's back doing. We'll talk more about that in just a moment. A massive retro gaming fan, and actually, we're going to talk about his brand new retro gaming movie that actually you can support from today. So more on that coming up very soon, but let's welcome on our guest this week, Jason Bradbury. How's it going, Jason?
Oh, epic. Dan, Joe, what an absolute pleasure to be back, because I'm actually OG now. I'm an old-timer.
Yeah, it was out. I had a look, January 2020 we had you on, so it was a bit of a different world back then.
God, mate, that was the bewitching month.
Yes.
That's when, I'm right on it, that was just before lockdown happened. It's not a year on from it. Was it 2019 or was it 20?
It was 2020. It was before. March. We went into lockdown, but it was January, February when they started talking about it.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Which is, it's actually really bizarre, because back then, last time we had you on, we used to record this show in a radio studio, local radio station. We used to use our studio kind of off-peak in the evenings, but obviously everything's kind of done remotely these days. We've all got our heads around that, which kind of ties in quite nicely to what you're doing, because you've actually brought back the Gadget Show as a podcast in the last kind of year or so.
I love the idea that I've brought it back. It's all me. No, I left the Gadget Show, I don't know, I can't remember, but 7 or 8 years ago. It feels like forever. And I left television. I'd been working in TV for over 20 years, and it had always been my real ambition to work in telly. And I'd gone to university to study film and TV, and I ended up, in TV. It was wonderful. So it was a real realization of an ambition and a dream. So it was quite a big deal to step away from it, but I felt like I'd done everything I could do, and I always felt like a bit of a fake, if I'm honest, because I'm just a guy from like Lincolnshire, and a breakdancer from Lincolnshire. There's not many of us, and television's kind of what you think it is. It's quite corporate, and I think I used to annoy everyone with my kind of, I'd kind of get insistent about certain things, or I wouldn't kind of want to schmooze and all that sort of stuff. And I don't know, it was cool. There were some great people. I worked with some amazing people, but I also felt culturally, there was aspects of television that I didn't really belong in, right? And so the Gadget Show was brilliant, because it kind of wasn't any of that. It was all about a bunch of enthusiastic geeks getting together, talking tech, and thinking, wouldn't it be funny if we blew this up, or wouldn't it be funny if we catapulted this over a lake or something, And so it was good. And once you've done that enough, once you've bungee jumped off enough suspension bridges, or I think I got 7 world records in my collection by the time I left. There's it kind of gets like anything, even though it's insane and it was an amazing thing, it gets a little bit samey. And also we'd had some issues with the health of someone in my family. And so, which had really taken its toll. So not only did I leave the Gadget Show, I left London and we went around the world for a year. We took the kids out of school and we went travelling for a year. So it was a huge, big, total change. So anyway, 7 years on, 8 years on, whatever it is, I got a phone call, January just gone, from the original producer of the show. And he said, how'd you like to come back and do a podcast with Susie? And it was because that was not television and it was such an unusual ask that I said yes. Otherwise, if they'd said, do you want to come back and do the Gadget Show? I'd have probably said no. But doing a podcast with the lovely Susie, I couldn't resist it, and I'm so pleased I did. We've now done 12 eps. We've just started recording the second series. We've picked up a sponsor, so it's good. It's very funny, actually. It's like the kind of sort of belt and braces version of the Gadget Show. It's really funny. Like I say, we picked up a sponsor. Trust me, we did the first series. We did it. No one was paid. This one, I think we're getting a little bit, but trust me, we ain't doing it for the money. We're doing it because it's just great, and good things come from small beginnings. So, here we go. You can find it on YouTube or Spotify. It's completely free. So please listen to it.
I'll link it in the show notes so people can click through as well.
That'd be cool. Yeah. It's fun. It's been really fun. I'm sure you can ask me more questions, but I was just going to roll into what we've been doing. But I should shut up and let you ask me what you want to hear.
Well, I was going to ask off the back of the the podcast and stuff. Looking back, obviously, pretty much 20 years now, 15 years in the Gadget Show and stuff. Did you ever think you'd be able to kind of do, I know it's a podcast, but essentially a TV studio in your own home kind of thing, or, just
that is
like
really
we are right now, essentially. Did you ever think that would happen? Because it's crazy how far technology has come.
I didn't. And my job, really, the reason I was able to leave the Gadget Show is because my job is talking to companies about transformative technologies, so AI and whatever. And so even though I'm used to sort of projecting into the future, the concept that we've been watching, not just say Sky News, but like every major news organisation now makes use of guests who are coming live to the studio from their home setup. So it'll be a professor, and they'll be, battling with their cat, trying to get him off the desk while they try and, sound all official and stuff. It's absolutely amazing. That and the growth of live streaming, which my son's a big advocate of. He's a big Twitcher. And really, I would say Twitch, that saved my mental health in lockdown. A lot of people, I'm sure, had a worse case in lockdown than I did. But I did feel like I was living in the asylum, I was bouncing off the walls at certain times and being able to live stream. It was quite funny. You'd think that I'd be down with all that, right? And the setup now, as you can attest, I've got a pretty good setup, Looking at your microphone, Dan, that's pretty damn cool, mate. And, I've invested in far too much tech than is actually necessary. And I love it. But when I first started out streaming and Zooming and doing all that sort of stuff in lockdown, I was using it was so funny. I'm embarrassed. I was using this thing called a Mevo, and it's it's what like evangelistical churches use to capture the band and stream it and stuff. It was really not the right device. It was like a kind of almost like a 360 camera with a kind of do-it-all microphone inside the camera. It was just terrible quality. And how the whole sort of genre has grown to encompass streaming and a kind of a whole set of cultural norms now around talking to chat and then rewarding the streamer with bits in Twitch's case, or roses on TikTok and all, what I mean? Isn't it amazing how it's gone? So not just this Joe chatting remotely when last time I spoke to you, like you say, you were in a radio studio, but also the myriad of new platforms and superstars and revenue. It's amazing.
I think probably the pandemic helped a lot with that, because we kind of had to, it dropped everyone in the deep end, didn't it? If you want to make content, you had to quickly figure out this stuff, and we're kind of learning it as we went along.
You did. And a lot of brands like Elgato which I'd never even heard of, really. I remember being offered like an HD 60 or whatever it was, some kind of capture card back in the day before lockdown, and just saying, nah, you're all right, it's okay, thanks, not interested.
What will you use that for?
Yeah, and I was struggling to try. They were like crack. It was like gold, wasn't it? Trying to get a capture, like a streaming capture card that you could plug an HDMI cable into, so that you could get your digital SLR or whatever. So you could kind of go one up from webcams, because in general terms, I've done quite a bit around webcams, and there are some cool webcams out there. But in general, I don't think it's too provocative to say that a digital SLR camera with a capture card of some kind into the back of a PC or Mac is generally going to deliver the best solution. Yeah, because I think all spaces aren't created equally, are they? So I've got I think I've got a 35mm lens on this camera that I'm talking to you on. I know we're not doing video, but my son, for example, has got like a 24mm lens, and because he wants to show his whole setup and his nano leaves and his keyboard, and so that flexibility is there. And then we talk about the microphones. I mean, there's the one thing I would say is the USB microphones are excellent, aren't they?
Yeah.
That's a whole new world of growth. And then have you noticed this trend as well? Things become normal, right? That weren't normal. I'll tell you what I'm talking about. This is quite meta, what I'm about to say, right? So I saw an AI, and it did this AI video program, and it creates like reporters for you, right? So that when you're doing, I'm not using it, I wouldn't dream of using it, but it was just like an item reviewing this particular service on YouTube. And what this service does is you can choose a reporter, and the reporter will go to whatever environment you want them to be in, and they'll report to your content. So you write the content into the AI, and this avatar basically says it, and they walk along a market and they appear on the Serengeti and they talk about wild animals, whatever, right? It's a bit random and it's not there yet. But here's the thing that I noticed. This is so postmodern, right? In one of the pretend avatar reporters was holding a lapel mic.
Yeah, like all the Twitch,
yes,
or it's TikTok, really, isn't it? You see that, yeah.
You see people holding lapel mics, and I'm like, that's just comedy to me. It's like a mini mic. It's like a stupid thing, but it's become acceptable because it's these new norms are what happens, aren't they? When, especially digital culture accelerates so quickly, to the extent that now, when you want to make a synthetic reporter look real, you give them this stupid mic in their hand.
I was wondering where you were going with that. It's all the TikTokers, when you see them in the city centres and they're like, tell us where Africa is on this map or whatever, and that's what they have. You're totally right. They've got the little lapel mics and they're holding it to the students.
The key's in the name, guys.
Yeah. It's got a clip on for a reason. Yeah,
and it's called a hand mic, the other one, for a reason.
You can get those. Yeah, it is insane. Now, I was still going to talk more about AI in a moment. There's a little teaser there, but I mean, looking back at kind of 'cause I did realise that the Gadget Show turned 20. A couple of months ago. It launched back in June of 2004. And kind of looking back on, when that show began, like, the PlayStation 2 was the current big console, and Apple had just released the Power Mac G5. That was kind of their flagship machine. So, I mean, kind of looking back on that era, 20 years gone, I mean, what's some of the best technology you remember being excited about back then?
I remember the PS3. I remember being in the studio, and we would record the Christmas specials literally like a week before Christmas, to coincide with a lot of the kind of new releases, which are quite, which they hold back, And Susie led a big reveal so we would sit around and we'd give each other presents, and of course they'd be wrapped up in wrapping paper, and no one would know what they'd got. And Susie gave me a PS3 when it was launched, and I mean, these were like rocking horse proverbial. I mean, they were just as hotly contested as I'm guessing the PS5 Pro will be. Pricing issues put to one side, it'll still be hotly anticipated, and I'm sure that'll be difficult to get. So that was a very memorable one. Obviously, seeing the first iPhone being, I think, the first, well, certainly without a shadow of a doubt, the first TV show in the UK, potentially the first TV show in the world to thoroughly review the phone. I mean, there might have been Good Morning America might have had it on or something like that. But we received the phone. I don't know where we were. I think we might have been in Spain. Me and Susie. Susie had the Nokia N95, which was that was the market leader in terms of the new genre, the genre platform of smartphones. And I was given the brand new phone from Apple, which is supposed to be so easy to use, you don't need a manual, right? And that was what we built the challenge around. Basically, I said, and I'm going to need to know how to use it, pull out from the helicopter that was above us, because we're on a suspension bridge. First one to text, pull me up, it wins. And then we just jumped. And I jumped with obviously I had a bungee cord, Susie as well, and we swung underneath. And I'm swinging underneath, going, okay, try not to vomit. This phone from Apple is a beautiful thing. It was like a bit of a bar of soap, which is why I've sellotaped it to my hand. And okay, it's turning on. That's interesting. There's the Apple logo and all this kind of stuff. And then going through that kind of like convoluted welcome, that welcome, all that.
You're like, hurry up!
Well, shut up, just get to it. And then working out, because it's difficult to imagine. I literally can't remember, but there was and even if I could remember, it wouldn't have the same effect, because a lot of the ways in which the ergonomics of the iOS, even now, kind of operates, are familiar to us now. We've been trained in it, but back then it was totally alien.
Yeah, a touchscreen keyboard.
Yeah, I mean, swiping your finger on the screen, believe it or not, no one had done that.
Mm.
Certainly nothing I'd used had done that. None of the market leaders had done it. I don't think it was the N95. I don't think the N95 had a touchscreen, did it?
No, it didn't, though.
Yeah, it was just absolutely insane. It was insane. So I can't not mention that. I mean, there are so many different pieces of tech. The One Wheel, when the One Wheel first came into the studio, which is this big sort of, it's like a go-kart wheel with a skateboard around it. And it's all gyroscopically stabilised. So you stand on it, and what would be a seesaw would naturally either go to the right or to the left. It just balances, and then you just think about moving forward, and it just flows, man. And I've had One Wheels, my collection, ever since. And I used it today. I went down. I had to go and pick my car up from the MOT, and I went down on my One Wheel. And first experiencing that was cool, because there are certain technologies where you kind of like, God, that's different, man. What is this? I've never imagined that. And that Segway derived, self-stabilizing personal vehicle, that was a new category that happened when we were doing the Gadget Show.
It's interesting that you mentioned the One Wheel there, because our next question is actually, was there any sort of piece of technology that you really thought would catch on and it just never did? You thought like, wow, this is the future? Because it's like, it's funny that you mentioned the One Wheel Segways, the hoverboards, when everybody had them. At the moment, it's obviously the e-scooters and stuff like that. But was there anything you thought that's the future, and then it just? There was
never a point when they were called Swegways, weren't they, or hoverboards? There was never a point when they didn't catch on. Like every kid on planet Earth wanted those. And then the derivative technologies, like you say, like the scooters that came out of that, and the One Wheel and some of the. But I would say stuff that didn't catch on. I would say VR. And I mean, as I look to my right, I've got not one but two VR helmets, and within 3 feet of me, right?
How often do you use them though?
All the time.
Right, okay, interesting. Because Joe and I have got them as well.
Yeah.
And we thought we'd use them all the time.
What have you got? Quest 3?
Oculus, Quest, but it's...
When I use the HTC Vive, to answer your question, Joe, I mean, I literally, you couldn't take my money quick enough. I was like literally running after the guy saying, please, can you get me one of the first batch? I have to have it. I used the HTC Vive, and I used that. There was like a painting program, and you could paint in midair. Do you remember that? And you could make three-dimensional objects, but like literally out of oil paint or spray or whatever. Absolutely blew my mind. And I've had so many experiences in VR that are mind-blowing. I'm not like, why isn't everyone doing this? Why isn't everyone screaming about this? I understand the barrier to entry. I'm not, disconnected from that. What I'm saying is, why hasn't the inevitable acceleration of that technology happened so much more quickly?
Yeah.
So why am I not looking at you through these blue glasses that I've got on with, I don't know, not that I need a script for this podcast, but why is the script and your names and LinkedIn and God knows what else, not hovering in front of me right now in my augmented reality dailies. Why are we not there? Because here's the thing, I don't know what your listeners will think to this, but my opinion is that's an inevitability.
Yeah.
As sure as day, the Egyptian tablet that is the modern mobile phone is not ergonomically designed to do what we're doing. That's why people look like they're in pain when they're stood at the bus stop, looking at the floor with their necks straining, or it's why
walking into lampposts.
Yeah, or walking into your car, like on the one wheel. I go to London sometimes, and if I'm ever going through the park, so pedestrians and cyclists and other types of vehicles meet in, say, Hyde Park, I've got to have my wits about me, not because I'm going to fall off, but because someone's just going to walk into me because they're looking at their phone, right? You see my point, and I'm a bit orthodox about it because I'm a huge fan, like a massive fan. I defy anyone, to play Half-Life Alyx on a decent headset, like a Valve, something like something from Valve or something that's high
PC
end.
connected,
yeah. Although I would argue the Quest 3 is exceptional, or to watch the basketball on an Apple Vision Pro. I defy anyone not to think this is incredible.
Yeah.
But Joe, it hasn't moved as quickly as I thought it would. Sorry, Dan, I didn't mean to.
That's all right. So I was going to say, I remember trying those, the virtuality headsets back in the early 90s. And it kind of feels like, I remember back then thinking, by the time we got to 94, 95, we're going to have them on our computers at home, and it kind of faded away, then it's come back again. But yeah, it does kind of feel like it's not quite at the point of mass adoption quite yet.
It's a funny one for me because I've got a Quest 2. I got that when it was new. And I literally remember texting you, Dan, and I remember my words were, and I purely bought it. I'm a big horror fan. I purely bought it for the Resident Evil 4 VR.
Yes.
And I absolutely adored it. And I said to Dan, I don't think I can go back to normal gaming after this. Like, that's how I felt at the time.
Yeah.
Like, I was like, this is phenomenal. And then I think I blitzed it every night for 3, 4, maybe 5 months. And then I've not touched the thing. And I don't really know why. I don't know.
It's a funny thing that you really pointed out something that I've not really thought about. And that is, you're right. And if I'm honest, if I'm really honest, that's kind of me. It might not be months, but it might be several weeks between, a session. And it might be a YouTuber doing something. And I'm like, oh, I'll have to give that a spin. And you've tried the retro arcades and stuff, right? With the ROMs that you can load into it, which I just think is cool. And isn't that bloke, the guy that invented the original Oculus, isn't he working on some grand arcade gaming museum project? I'm sure.
Oh, really?
He feels a bit like, if you ignore the fact that he's like a big Trump supporter and all that stuff, because there's a whole load of controversy around him, I'm sure he reminds me of the who's the guy who dies and leaves his estate, if you can work out the puzzle, in Ready Player One. It feels like he's a bit like that.
Yeah.
Like he's attempting to create a type of metaverse, but it's all it's like, I might be wrong, it's like a retro gaming universe or something like that.
Yeah, it's very cool. But I mean, kind of talking about other interests that you have, because I know you do a live stream called Way of the Exploding Show that people can watch on the usual platforms. I'll link that up as well. I was watching one of them where you're talking about the fact that you've got a massive cassette tape collection. So I was quite interested to hear where does your love of cassette tapes come from then? And
just because, like, when you've compiled the album, the playlist yourself, physically, and then written on the bit of paper on the front, the sticker, and named it, that's something so analog that I can't, in good faith, get rid of it. And the connection, my DNA is in those tapes, and you can hear the love you've given the tapes because it affects the audio quality every time you play them. So that's why, and it's the same reason why, I'd rather have this ZX Spectrum. I just happen to have it with me because I've been doing loads of photographs of my kit for the Kickstarter. This, you can smell that this is from when was it, 83, was it? I can't even remember. there's no substitute for this. Like, there's no way you're going to look at the new one that's coming out. Apparently, it's like isn't it like 85 quid or something? There's another, and it's got loads of preloaded games, I think, and all that stuff. But you're never going to mistake that one for this. And I mean, it'd be interesting to see if the one that they're bringing out, the new one, is going to be metal. And so it's just because you can't recover that. That's rarity. That's actual rarity. It's as precious as gold, isn't it? And it's one of the reasons why you do what you do and why we love what we love, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. It's interesting that you said about the smell of it as well. Because definitely, when you have these old collections and stuff like that, it is definitely that smell and that love and that kind of like worn out play to it as well, for sure. And you don't get that, like you've just said, with a Spectrum or with a Sega Mega Drive or whatever. You don't get that with the new ones, and there's definitely something nostalgic about that for sure.
Do you know what? Yeah. That's so crazy, man. I want to read you something, and this is not a plug. It's just so pertinent. It's ridiculous. I've got to read it to you, right? It's one of the characters in my movie, and what he says, his name's Psy, spelt P-S-Y, and he says, "I've always felt these old machines have a life force, an energy made up of all the people that played them, all the wins, the losses, frustration and the joy soaked into the circuit boards over decades."
Nice.
Well, that's put a lot more beautifully than I put it, but it's a very, very similar sentiment.
The only reason I can remember that's from the script, but I actually put that as a quote on the website. That's the only reason I was able to remember it, because that's what I was trying to evoke, exactly what you're getting at.
Yeah.
And sometimes that, the smell, the whatever it is, it's not. Sometimes it's not even you. I've bought machines, hardware from car boots, and you can smell where it's come from, and not in a gross way, just in a way that is just quite endearing and unique, like, which is amazing. And it's it's actual DNA. It's not like metaphorically the DNA of the owner. It is their DNA. Like,
yeah.
I think it's amazing. And when it heats up, the smell changes. I tell you
that
something.
Leaded solder, isn't it, in the old systems? You can smell that sometimes.
Yeah, it's giving us all Alzheimer's. But there's another thing I did as well, which you might be familiar with. So I've got a bit of a collection of Sony PVMs, the personal video monitors.
CRTs.
Yeah, and when I put those on, less so now because they used to, but when I put them on, initially, all of my kids, I've got 3 kids, run downstairs and go, what's going on? What are you doing? What's that noise? And I'm like, what noise? And there is a frequency that their young ears can detect coming out of those CRTs and that I can't detect. And I did it as a post, as a Twitter post or something, I can't remember. In fact, I might repost that because it'd be quite fun to do it. And I said to people, let me know if you can hear this. And people could hear it.
Yeah.
And I can't hear it at all. Like, forget about it. So there is something very bewitching, very physical, very kind of otherworldly about cassette tapes, old consoles, old games, old computers. We're not imagining it, Joe. It's real.
It's 100% real. And I miss it. I miss the sound of going through an old bucket of Sega Mega Drive games, and even just the smell, as well as the clang of the plastic and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
You really don't get that anymore. But I couldn't bring myself to put my collection in a bucket like that, to be perfectly honest as well.
What's going on? He's using a bucket. Come on, man.
So last couple of questions about retro tech before we get into what looks absolutely fantastic, your film. What's a piece of retro tech that you'd love to see make a comeback in the modern world? Because obviously cassettes, vinyl, VHS to an extent are all making a comeback. What would you love to see?
So if this first Kickstarter experience hadn't already killed me, I'd go for another one, and it'd be a version of the Sinclair C5.
Nice.
I reckon I would not be able to make enough of them. Honestly, I really mean this. I'm talking about a vehicle made in 1985 that only sold a few hundred and, effectively bankrupt Sinclair Research. It was not a commercial success. And I am outright saying, and you can quote me on this, if you were to Kickstarter fund something now and were able, within the realms of licensing, I don't know what the licensing issues would be, to reference the Sinclair C5 as part of the marketing and to finesse some form of design that, unlike lots of these new car designs, like the new Capri, unlike those, actually looks like the vehicle that was its inspiration. In this case, the Sinclair C5. You know, I'm not saying I wouldn't want to call it the Sinclair C6 or anything like that. It would be called something like the S5 or something like that, or the SC5. You know what I mean? In the way that sometimes retro mini console remakes sometimes channel the original to get around licensing. If you were able to talk about that vehicle, re-engineer it from the ground up using modern electric bike motors, parts, proper brakes, like not the caliper brakes that it uses, but you know, whatever they're called, the disc brakes, with really cool LED lighting, with a kind of slight nod to the kind of DeLorean, you know. I reckon, I honestly think I wouldn't be able to make enough. I think it would be, I reckon I'd fund it 1.5 million, I reckon I'd get. Honestly. Yeah. But the reality is, as you know, the amount of work you'd have to do, I mean, just the design cost, to be able to do what I've just said and get it, you know, really get it right. You'd need to employ someone from Lotus, or, you know, you'd need a proper vehicle designer, because as you look at the Sinclair C5, I mean, that body it's extraordinary. You know, the way that they molded it, it's incredible. It's so complicated, right? And think, you got to mold that, and then whatever it is, 40 years on, it's not bent out of shape or melted. You know, maybe discoloured, but not that much. I just love it.
Which is bizarre for Sinclair, because a lot of their stuff was made very disposable, you could say, almost. The watches, you know, the failed like within a few weeks, and the computers were only designed to last like a year or two. But yeah, you make a good point there. And I think in terms of, you know, technology that was really ahead of its time, I mean, obviously EVs are huge these days, but you know, the fact that Clive was doing that back in the 80s and everyone laughed at him for doing it.
But I think people would laugh now. I think people would laugh now, and they'd say all the stories on like the news, the aforementioned Sky News, you know, the BBC, they'd laugh at it, and yet they wouldn't realise that you were going to sell, you know, 40,000 of them. I think despite those people, but the kind of cynicism of modern journalists, right? Because I just think they're cool. They're just cool. And I look, I'm going to make a confession. I'm actually looking at one right now. It's right there. I can't spin my camera around, otherwise. Well, no, we're audio only. I'm looking at it right now, and it's in my my gaming room, and it's just so cool. And the reason that it is one piece is because the reason it's built like a tank is because the structural integrity is such that to support the weight of a range of different bum sizes, that plastic has to be thick. Yeah. And then you don't have two grades of plastic, because then you've got two moulds. And it's the moulds back then. The reason I know this is my dad, not only did my dad work in the injection and extrusion plastic moulding industry, he actually worked at some point with Sinclair.
Oh, wow.
And I just wish I'd been more cognizant at the time, but I can't tell you what he worked on because I just honestly don't remember. But I remember him bringing home the original Sinclair watch and bringing home the ZX80 and having not owning, but having a Sinclair C5 to play around with at the factory. So I don't know what his factory actually did. They might have just pitched for it and not actually ended up doing anything, but multiple occasions he was working with Sinclair, because Sinclair was a celebrity. My dad used to tell me, like, yeah, we're working with Sinclair, it's really cool. Yeah, so that's why it was built out of such strong material. I'd just do the same thing.
Yeah.
I'd do the same thing. I'd make it in the same way, like a single piece of a kind of off-white grey kind of, well, I mean, even the front kind of hub, I don't know what you call it. It's got like a cover on the foot. It's a recumbent bicycle, three-wheeler. Right, and at the front single wheel, it's got like a shroud over it, but it literally looks like something out of Blake 7 or Star Wars. Yeah. I mean, it's very like, you know, the wheels on R2-D2 or something like that.
Yeah.
Look very like what you'd imagine the future would have looked like to people in the 70s or 80s.
Yeah, and remember the internals as well are dark grey.
It does actually remind me of the whiteness of it, and funny enough that you just said the 70s look of it, Alien, like the original look of Alien. Yeah. That's what it always reminds me of the
it's totally Alien, and his other products, especially the ZX80, are totally Kubrick as well.
Yeah.
2001, that's what the ZX80 looks like. It looks like the tech on board the spaceship, because we channel popular culture, don't we? We are all products of what we consumed as kids. And then when we're older and someone gives us some money, we design, the Motorola StarTAC to look like the tricorder or whatever it is,
Yeah, well, I mean, the iPhone's like the Star Trek communicator, isn't it, pretty much?
Completely, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, let's talk about the movie then, because we have teased this, and it is very exciting. I mean, we're talking before about hacker movies that we're all huge fans of. War Games is like my favourite film of all time. And actually, this is launched on Kickstarter today when this podcast comes out.
That's amazing.
It's a new independent film called Ctrl A.I Delete. And I love the idea of this as well, because it's basically retro gamers saving the world from artificial intelligence. So I'd love to find out a bit more about kind of the story of this and what kind of inspired you to make this then.
So at a sort of sub level, what inspired me to make this is that nothing works anymore. And that being an early adopter, as I'm sure you two qualify, like nothing works. And I think that's funny. I think that has great comic potential. So look, I did a film degree back in 89 to 92 at Bristol. With me on the course, although Simon Pegg was a year above, but Simon Pegg, David Walliams was my best mate, Mivanwi Moore, who went on to become the series producer of Little Britain, hence Mivanwi, the only gay in the village, the barmaid. Dominic Diamond, who was going out with Miff, we used to call him Miff at that time. And actually, while we were doing we all formed a comedy club called David Icke and the Orphans of Jesus. And while Dominic was doing that, he went off to do an audition, and of course he got it, and he became the host of Games Master, right? This all happened around those 3 years, right? And ever since then, I'd always wanted to make a movie, and I wrote a movie with a comedian friend of mine. I did a kind of I don't know what you'd call it, like a kind of prank show for Bravo, or I think we pitched it to Bravo, although we never got it away. But I was working with Bravo at the time, which was a kind of digital channel back in the day.
Yeah.
And during that, I was scouting for comic talent, and I found a comedian called Mark Felgate. He's now like my best mate. This is like, what is this? This is probably 30 years ago.
Wow.
And ever since then, Mark and I have written stuff. So, for example, on the Gadget Show, you might remember they made a robot of me called Robo Jace.
Yeah.
And one of the challenges that we did, we would return to Robo Jace once a series, right? And we put him in a comedy club. And we were like, can a robot do a comedy act? And so the comedian we got to write the jokes for him was Mark Felgate. And then I keep getting Mark jobs, and he keeps getting me gigs, and we kind of help each other out. And in amongst all this, about 12, 13 years ago, we wrote a movie, and it was set in Lincolnshire, where I grew up, and it was about a bunch of chancers, effectively based on the people I went to school with. Because Lincolnshire, parts of that county, which I absolutely love with all my heart, are quite run down. There's quite a lot of poverty in the county, and so there's some really interesting working class stories, sort of northern. Although it's questionable whether Lincolnshire is in the north, but you know what I mean. That northern comedy is like a genre, like a British genre, isn't it? For TV and movies, and so it kind of suggests a lot of that sort of content. And we wrote a movie, weirdly enough, about a couple of guys who train a bird to catch a ball in mid-flight, drop it in a hole in a golf tournament, and win a Bentley. It was called Pigeonholed, right? They were pigeonholed as losers, and they train a bird to catch a ball. It's Pigeonholed. And we took this feature film around, because I used to be a caddy in the 80s, basically, in the local golf club, and it was always used to make me laugh. I was treated like SHIT by these posh golfers. I never kind of dealt with it. So my kind of cathartic, response was to write a movie about them, and we couldn't get it away either because it sucked or because it's just really hard to sell a movie. And then we always said we'd do another one. Then Mark became quite ill about a year ago, or a bit longer than that, and I rang him in the hospital. He was in the hospital for like 3 months, and I said, like, when you get out, we're going to write a movie, and this time we're going to get it made. And then he got well, and he said, right, what's the movie about?
Got to do it now.
And and I don't know, I can't remember the kind of, the moment that it came into my head, But obviously I talk about AI a lot in my work. AI was happening. Everyone was asking questions. It was in the air. And then, I'm probably sat here looking at my Atari 2600 and it just all came together. That was a bit of a long-winded answer, but that kind of explains it.
Interesting. Yeah.
So the films, is there any kind of because when I read it and I look at it, I'm straight away, my brain's going to Terminator, in terms of Skynet and AI.
100%.
It's going to war games, but then there's going to be an element of comedy in there. And I'm thinking, you mentioned Simon Pegg earlier on, in The Year Above You, I'm thinking Hot Fuzz. I'm thinking Phoenix Nights.
Yeah.
What are the main inspirations? What can we expect?
Everything you just said.
Everything I just said. Next question.
Phoenix Nights. I wouldn't say Hot Fuzz was part of my reference, although I love that movie. Whenever you say Hot Fuzz, I think of Simon Pegg pole vaulting over the hedge,
Yeah.
or whatever it was, somersaulting over the hedge. In-Betweeners, Phoenix Nights, that sort of rude social commentary. I love it. I think it's it's kind of what we do best in the UK. We're really good at laughing at ourselves, but with warmth and love and respect. And there's also a lot of pathos in those kinds of shows. And the film, movies, unless it's a slapstick comedy, which our film isn't, you have to have some meaning, some depth, some psychology in it. There has to be a moment when you're not quite sure whether you're supposed to cry or laugh as well. And so that's why those references that you just made are relevant. And yeah, War Games is a unique entity. It's also an IP that's not been reborn. People haven't gone back to it. There's not a War Games 2. There's no, as far as I'm aware, there's no remake on the cards. And so that's a really good reference. And while the AI isn't prescient, it's not self-aware like Terminator is. It's not going to deploy robots and drones. But when our guys start to try initially to bring it down, because obviously, I haven't even told you the story, have I? Should I tell you the story and then it might make some sense?
Do.
Yeah. Okay. So it's set in Skegness,
brilliant,
obviously, where I sort of grew up just down the road from Skeggy, or Skeg Vegas as we call it, and a bunch of friends who share a love of retro gaming, cosplay, the sort of stuff that we're very familiar with at the events that I'm sure that you go to as well at Blackpool and in London and Manchester. Their annual gaming event is about to happen in Skeggy. And while they're at their retro gaming event, with the halls full of arcade machines, consoles, early, gaming computers, an AI is rolled out, an artificial intelligence update is rolled out globally, and with great fanfare. It's on all the TVs in the opening sort of minutes of the movie, if you like, the weeks before they go to the expo, the first 20 minutes or so of the film. You're made very aware from the headlines in the kind of fuel station forecourt on the newspapers that this rollout is coming, and we're being promised it's going to bring all these amazing advances and services and so on. Effectively, all that happens is, to make my previous point about nothing working, it rolls out instantly. Everything goes to SHIT, right? There's a blackout, global blackout, power blackout, run on the banks. These stock markets are in free fall. The sort of what would you call them? Protesters that were protesting out on the streets in the first few moments of the movie that we see, they become rioters. They then get into looting. People are raiding the supermarkets. Transportation stopped. It's absolute global chaos. But our lot of friends, happy-go-lucky retro gamers, are in the expo, not quite believing what's going on outside. Not too fussed though. They've got a generator. They've got a canteen. Let's just bunker down, right?
Right.
Until one of them suggests that maybe we could help with this room full of Commodore 64s and Amstrads and ZX Speckies. I think the phone line still works. We've got a US Robotics modem, 28.8K, whatever it is, and so
nice.
that's basically what happens. That's when it becomes a hacker movie. And yeah, I forget the point I was making earlier, but that's the basics. That's the basis for it. Oh yeah, and so it's not like Terminator, Joe, in that the AI isn't so much malevolent as like any system that you like try and hack like a server, now, today, and see what happens. And what will happen is the server will protect itself. The cybersecurity systems that surround all major, digital infrastructure will, counterattack with a small a. And your denial of service attack will get reported, and then you'll, depending on where you are, you might get, the SWAT team might turn up, or you might get a nasty letter from BT. But basically these systems do defend themselves, and that's what happens. And although it does defend itself quite aggressively, but it's not a science fiction film, it's based on reality, and that's because it's funnier. It's a funnier, more down to earth rendering of the same sorts of themes of those kinds of films.
Oh, fantastic.
And you've got a website that people can check out, Ctrl A.I Delete.net, which, of course, I'll put in the show notes, and a link to the Kickstarter as well. I'm looking at it as well, and the aesthetic of the film, I think, looks really interesting. I mean, it kind of looks like it could, the screen grabs on your website, looks like it could be like a screenshot of like some like Stranger Things, for example. Very 80s kind of aesthetic. You've got a nice picture of the Sinclair Spectrum there as well, a close-up of the keyboard. So have you kind of gone for, deciding on the look of the film then? Is it going to be kind of loads of neons and that kind of thing, like take us back to the arcades? Yeah, awesome.
I mean, we've not messed up the tracking. We're not going that far. But look, what in the 80s, right? There was certain technologies available to filmmakers, which is why films like Blade Runner and Die Hard look like the way they do, because those films, for example, were both filmed on anamorphic lenses that stretch the image, and then you de-stretch it when you come to edit it. But some of that stretch is still almost like a ghost. It's still kind of present within the image, right? Which is why in westerns, the gunfighters always look a little bit tall and a bit thin. That's the anamorphic lens. But it also has this amazing thing where it makes the bokeh, the globules of light behind in sort of cars in traffic in New York, it reduces them to beautiful sort of glowing shapes. And it splits light as well. When you shoot with an anamorphic lens at night time, or maybe arcade machines, it splits the light in a horizontal configuration, and the effect is just beautiful. It's kind of overused by like the modern Star Trek. J.J. Abrams' version uses the anamorphic effect, and I say that because a lot of the stuff that's in that frame is actually digital, so they're obviously doing it in post-production. Yeah. But we're not doing any CGI in our film, not that I know of. We might have to. There is a scene where there's a crash, which is going to be interesting, because I don't quite know how I'm going to afford to do that. I've got a few ideas up my sleeve, but basically we shot the footage you're referring to on an anamorphic lens. Nice. I bought an anamorphic lens, and I fitted it to a Sony A7S III, which is a very affordable. Well, it's affordable in cinema terms. I mean, it's about $3,500, but it's not 150 grand. And so I put an anamorphic lens on that, and then I fitted it to a DJI Ronin thingy, the self-stabilizing widget, and that's what you're seeing in the promo, which you can see. There's a 4-minute promo. There's only a few seconds of the footage I'm referring to, because that's all I could afford. I had to get my lead actor down from Wales. I had to get a DP, that's a director of photography, to hold the camera and do all the stuff and do all the lighting. I had to hire the lights, had to hire the venue, and all of that stuff that's literally all I could afford. But I wanted to make an effort. I wanted to show people a little taste of how this is going to look. But that aesthetic that you're referring to, Dan, that kind of blue, red, neon, Stranger Things look, that's what the movie's going to look like, although it's set in modern day Skeggy.
Yeah.
And that's, for me, it's a joke. It's like a really funny kind of, I don't know, I don't want to sound like I'm disciplining up my own backside, but it is a kind of cinematic joke. Like you apply that effect to something that's very mundane, like life in Lincolnshire, and I can say that because I was living in Lincolnshire until 3 years ago, and with all the love and respect that I can muster, it's a very real environment, and I think we'll benefit from that. So applying that cinematic approach to something like that is going to be a really interesting result.
I love that. I love that idea of the American style 80s, American kind of graffiti neon, but it's Skegness.
Yeah, that's it. And in the trailer, there is a moment where everything stops, and we purposely stop the music. And this cool guy, we call him Mr. Birdseye, and he just goes through frame on a mobility scooter. And it's beautiful.
That's absolutely brilliant. Well, let's have a quick chat about the soundtrack. You've teased that Utah Saints will be doing the music for the film. How did they get involved, and how do you think the sound will fit into the style of the movie?
Well, Utah Saints got involved because DJ Tim from Utah Saints is my schoolmate.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and really good friends in the 80s. We were in a breakdance crew together. And he had already started DJing. In fact, my first ever record decks I bought off Tim. There were 2 belt drive Technics decks, and the reason he was selling them was because he was buying, direct drive 1200s to start his, albeit in the end, incredibly successful DJing career. And so I've been friends with Tim for years, and Tim still lives in Lincolnshire, and whenever I go up, which is regularly because my mom lives there and the other side of my family all live there, and we're up every month basically. Tim and I generally meet up, have a coffee, have a chat, and obviously when your mate's in an iconic 90s band, when you've got to find someone to curate the music for your movie, you go to them first. And to my absolute amazement, he said yes. And of course, he's got a band partner, Jez. And so I was thinking, I hope Jez likes it, because I know Jez, but I don't know him that well. But they both loved it. They thought it was cool. And yeah, that's mega, isn't it? And because they've done loads of music, for video games.
Yeah.
We've had them on. When they did Final Vendetta. Yeah,
cool.
A couple of years ago. Yeah.
Epic.
Yeah, actually, the Final Vendetta, didn't they? That beat 'em up game a couple of years ago.
That's right.
Brought the soundtrack out on vinyl as well, which I thought was awesome.
Yeah. So it's a real coup. I'm really, really excited about that.
Yeah. So talking about your kind of role in this as well, then. So when the production gets underway, when the Kickstarter is successful, which I'm sure it will be.
Thank you.
Are you going to be like, what's kind of your role in this? Then are you kind of director, producer? How's it going to work?
I'm the
then?
producer. So I co-wrote it with Mark Felgate. So I'll be on set every day, and I'll basically be doing what I'm told by my good friend Elizabeth Blake Thomas, who I've known for years. Our kids used to go to hang out at primary school together when I lived in Richmond, in Surrey, and during the time on the Gadget Show, actually. And since then, Elizabeth, like literally 12 years ago, emigrated to America and became a film director. And luckily, she's done a lot of films, but her thing is she does, low budget films. She doesn't do big Hollywood blockbusters. I mean, she's done a film with Mickey Rourke in it, so she's no stranger to working on large projects. But she's really good at making the money work, because this is proper grassroots. People will notice that our goal is 50 grand, right? That means if we make 50 grand in our Kickstarter and we're not able to make use of, say, a film fund or some other seed funding, we have to make the movie for 50 grand, and we all have to get together and make a decision. Can we do this? That means no one gets paid. It means that goes into the hiring of the equipment and the venue, and maybe some insurance. And everyone gives their time for free. So this is proper grassroots. This is about a bunch of people doing something that they love. And I think that's what's going to make it amazing. But we really do need support. There's no bank account anywhere. Just because I did a TV show like 8 years ago doesn't mean I've got any money at all. I'm like anyone else. It's like month to month in my family. And this is only going to happen if people get behind the Kickstarter and give us a chance. And we're giving loads of people an opportunity to do something amazing that could empower them. So we'll deliver a great film, but they'll also get, like, our lead actor Josh. This will be his first big lead role. And there are so many other people that I could bore you with that are all just getting on board. So I'll just be like a runaround. I just make sure that absolutely everything that Elizabeth wants during that period, that sort of 2 weeks of shooting or 3 weeks of shooting, there's a thing for you. We won't be shooting for months because we haven't got the budget to do that. Is the location that we're going to in 2 days' time, is it booked? Have we got parking? Did we pay the fee that we're supposed to pay to film in this particular location? Did we get the jackets and the costumes that we ordered? Have they arrived? If not, what do we do? That'll be my job. Yeah. And also stood there with Mark, and I've talked to Elizabeth about this. Watching the pivotal comedy scenes. I will be involved in that. I want to make sure that they're funny, because it's critically important, and it's so easy in the rush to get your day's agenda ticked off, it's easy to forget that maybe another take and we could really nail that line, you know. And so I will, so that's basically what I'll be doing day to day. And then after that, I'll be involved in the edit. I'm not going to edit it, I don't think, because I love editing. I've been editing my whole life, right, from the days of splicing celluloid film at 16mm in the film department at Bristol Uni, through the days of Avid, and then the first iterations of home computer editing solutions. And now, almost every day I'm on Premiere doing bits and pieces for work I do with clients or social media. But as I found out when we edited the promo that you're going to see when you get the Kickstarter, the guy that edited it is called Sam. He's our director of photography. He's actually in the promo. You'll see him. But just the way he approached the edit, it's just on another level to me.
Yeah, it's very well done. Yeah.
Good. I'm glad you think so. Yeah. I'll tell him that. And he, so I want to try and persuade him to do it. But don't know whether I'm going to outstay my my novelty when you're 3 months into an edit.
So I didn't actually realise until you just mentioned it then how small the budget could potentially be. I thought, you know, as you said, I naively thought it was Jason Bradbury from the Gadget Show. This is going to be, it's going to be bigger than that. Obviously, I didn't expect millions and millions, but you know, I didn't realise it was going to be 50k, which, you know, it sounds very inspiring. It actually comes to mind. I don't know if you've seen the film Turbo Kid.
I have seen Turbo Kid. What was the budget there?
$60,000 on that.
Okay, that makes me feel good, man.
Yeah, and I think, you know, I personally think that's a fantastic film. So, you know, I'm really, really rooting for you on this one. But in terms of the budget and, you know, the Kickstarter awards and stuff, can you tell us what cool perks backers will be able to get?
Because before today, because I'm talking about us going out on Friday, I couldn't talk about this because it was all like hush hush. So there's loads of cool things that you can grab. I'm actually wearing one of the T-shirts, which I will now describe to you. We've got a cool range of T-shirts with the Ctrl A.I Delete logo on the front, and then on the back, the full, what we call the No AI logo. In fact, maybe why don't you describe to your listeners what I'm about to hold up?
I was going to say the stop sign, your miles per hour, your speed sign.
It's a 50 mile an hour limit.
50 mile an hour limit.
If I spin it round,
okay. Yeah, the AI. It looks a bit like the Ghostbusters logo, but with AI.
That's not a coincidence. So it's basically, imagine a sort of no entry sign, but instead of the Ghostbuster, the ghost coming out of it, it's the word AI. I'm sure most people listening will have seen this because they might have clicked onto the website when you mentioned it. But that's the logo. It's like Banksy does riot wear. And that logo is on the back of the T-shirts, basically. And we've got it in white, we've got it in black. We've also got another one, which I can show you again, because I know we're audio, but when I show you things, then I get a reaction, don't I?
Yeah.
AI stole my job, and all I got was this lousy T-shirt. I love that.
That's awesome.
So that's quite cool. And then we've got another kind of asset, little retro computer on the front. And we've got a mug as well. AI stole my job, and all I got was this lousy mug. These are the sort of entry-level, relatively inexpensive things. There's caps. I've got a cap on here. Hoodies, digital download, signed pieces of the script. So we'll have loads of scripts. It's not a big cast, right? There's probably 12, 13 main people in it, but we'll get all of them to sign the parts of the script, pages of the script that are all used on set. So there's a lot of stuff that we're going to be using. Retro gaming cartridges, the odd retro gaming console, things like that you can buy. Cool stuff. I can't say yet because I don't know what we're going to use. So before I start, offering up my Atari 2600, signed by our lead actor or whatever, or not maybe, I don't know exactly what's going to be in there, but there's an opportunity to buy a prop, and then we choose one for you. But trust me, they're going to be cool. They're not going to just be. It's not going to be like an ornament. It's going to be something that features in the film that's really, really, really cool, like a Game Boy from the lead character's Game Boy, whatever it is, right? You can buy obviously a Blu-ray, which is de rigueur for Kickstarter movie projects, with some, as much behind the scenes footage as I can stack into it. We're not even going to bother editing the behind the scenes footage. We're just going to chuck it on there. So it's warts and all, some really funny moments, getting behind the cast and crew, making the props. We're going to be making our own fictional arcade machine. It's called Stardash. It's central to the narrative. I don't know to what extent it will function as in an actual game, because we don't have that kind of budget. But we have enough budget to create some, working visuals so that it looks like our main character is playing a game, which will be some form of platformer. But importantly, Stardash will have, like all old school arcade machines, an honor roll when it goes to default mode when no one's using it. So in the back of shot, while our main characters are doing some really meaningful scene, if you've paid for High Score Hero, which is one of our perks, you might just, well, you definitely will do if you've paid, your name will pop up next to one of the high scores. Okay, so I thought that was quite novel.
That's very cool.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah, we're also offering opportunities for you to be in the movie. There are several ways that you can buy a role in the movie. Some inexpensive, some a bit more pricey, depending on whether you want a line of dialogue or not. And other specific props that are relevant to the narrative. But I'll leave that for people to look at, because I don't want to give away absolutely everything. But there you go.
Talking about the systems that are going to be in there, do you think you'll be kind of dragging a lot of your collection on set then to use?
I think it's going to have to be. I mean, the thing is, like I said, we can't just say, great, let's put 10% of the budget over to props. It's not like that. Like the Sinclair C5, which you'll see in the promo and that will have a key role in the movie. I'm talking 120 frames per second, slow-mo, airborne, right? Or let's not even bother. Like my main thing at the moment is can you fly a 6'2" actor through the air in a Sinclair C5 without breaking the chassis of my Sinclair C5? So that gives you,
you're about to find out.
That gives you a sense of what might happen. Oh yeah, and there's also things like there's a VIP premiere, and we want to do a few of those. We want to do a premiere in Skegness. I want to do a premiere in a place called the Kinema in the Woods, which is a unique, beautiful cinema in Woodall Spa, which is actually where I grew up, which is about 18 miles, what would it be, northeast, southwest of Skegness, because that's where I used to go as a kid, and the idea of doing a movie premiere of my own movie is just too good an opportunity to miss. I think it can only seat 50 people or something, 100 people. And then we'll do one more centrally for people. If people want London, we'll do it in London. If they want Birmingham, we'll do it in Birmingham. And you can buy tickets to go to that, and there'll be a big presentation and a Q&A and all that stuff. And so there's loads of ways to get involved.
It sounds loads of fun, and I think our audience, people that love retro gaming, are a fan of those, like we said, those 80s and 90s hacker movies, and a film that just sounds a load of fun. So we wish you all the best with it, Jason. Like we said, it is running on Kickstarter now. Launches this Friday when the podcast comes out, so I'll link that in the show notes if people can hopefully go through and support it. We encourage everyone, because that's the thing with Kickstarters, some people think they're going to be running for a month. I'll do it in a few weeks, but it's that initial weekend, it's a really good time to support it and inspires other people. It would
do me such a huge honour if you went there today, checked it out. To find it, you can just write Jason Bradbury into Kickstarter, or you can write CTRL Control, new word, AI, and then delete into Kickstarter. Or if that doesn't if you don't remember that, Ctrl A.I Delete.net, and then you can click on the Kickstarter link.
Yeah, they'll all be in the podcast show notes as well, so people can click through.
Thanks, Dan.
Yeah, well, it's always a pleasure catching up with you, Jason, and best of luck with it. Can't wait to see you.
Oh, mate, brilliant. And Joe, thank you so much. Really appreciate it.